Good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon at this point. Again, my name is Nigel Jones. I'm a professional in private equity, currently focused on raising growth capital, private equity capital for defense companies in the EU. And today we're going to have a discussion about later stage capital, growth capital within the European Union for defense technology companies. But first, let's introduce my panelists. Rob?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real privilege for me to be here today, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Anduril began our journey in 2017 with the clear belief that the status quo was not moving quickly enough to meet the operational requirements of end users. And we've sought to develop software-defined, hardware-enabled systems that can be produced at relatively low cost and at scale. Since 2017, we've had a number of early rounds. And then since 2020, we've fundraised nearly every year. So Series D was 450 million in 2021. Series E and F were both approximately 1.5 billion. And Series G was 2.5 billion. We're in the process of finalizing our Series H. So for a 9-year-old company, we are 8,500 people globally. We have 100 people in London, and we're going to start our new office on the continent this year. And we want to really build in Europe for Europe.
Thank you. Dimitrios?
Welcome, everyone. My name is Dimitrios Kottas. I'm the founder and CEO at Delian. As Delian Alliance Industries, we have existed for a bit over 4 years right now. Our initial mission was, the company originally started by a bunch of Greek engineers of the diaspora. Me, myself, I was part of the US Greek diaspora, and how we could bring new technologies to the service of the Greek armed forces. That started before the war in Ukraine, before the war in the Gulf, before defense became a hot thing. Ever since then, we have raised 22 million euros. We have presence right now in Athens, London, and Kiev. And as a company, we have as clients, the Greek part of our company, we have as clients the Greek army. We work very closely with, we're proud to work very closely with the Greek army, the Ministry of Migration, the Greek police, the Hellenic Navy, and other clients I cannot disclose right now. Thank you everyone for your time here. And first and foremost, given there are a lot of officers here, thank you a lot for your service.
Vassilis?
Yeah, thank you, Nigel, and thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to sit along this great panel. My name is Vassilis Haloulakos. I am the CEO of ICEYE here in Greece, and I oversee the Balkan region and the Eastern Mediterranean. A few words about ICEYE. ICEYE is a company that started as a spin-off, as a university project in Finland, but over the past 11 years has expanded globally. It's a company that designs, manufactures, and launches small satellites with a radar system for Earth observation. So it's a dual-use system, particularly relevant for defense and security applications, given the resolution of the images is as precise as 25 centimeters. The company operates globally. Most of our customers are MODs in Europe. We have done a lot of work in Ukraine. The company came to Greece and established its office and production unit. It's important to say that here in Greece, the company manufactures very critical subsystems for each and every satellite that the company launches. The company has launched over 70 satellites so far. And when it comes to funding, last year in December, we raised our Series E. It was 200 million, led by General Catalyst. The total capital raised is over $700 million. And I'm very happy to be sitting with this panel here today.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's start off with a question for all of you. I think it's interesting to note that in all cases, in each of your cases, for each of your companies, you started the company with dual-use surveillance capabilities. Is that the ideal use case to scale quickly? We'll start with you, Rob.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a really helpful case to scale quickly. But I think where I would extend perhaps is how you're using that information. So you can have deployed sensors, but if there is edge computing and you're leveraging autonomy, and those systems are all networked together, you have a software platform that allows you to make use of that information and help the humans address those national security problems. So, you know, in Anduril's case, we were able to quickly change the hardware, change the software on our tower surveillance systems, and really demonstrate to the Customs and Border Patrol in the US how we could answer their operational requirements at speed. So it was really, I think, the software platform Lattice that enabled us to do that. But the surveillance technology was that gateway, so I think extremely helpful.
Dimitrios?
Yeah, I think it feels simpler when you are an outsider, outside defense, and you try to enter this sector. It's simpler to start with surveillance problems, or at least it felt like that 4 years ago when we started the company. For us, the original goal was, as engineers and engineers abroad working on other sectors, in the private sector, in the US, on technologies around perception, autonomy, target tracking, how we could use those technologies to help improve national security here. The first thing that came to mind was that as a country, Greece has one of the largest coastlines on the planet. However, it neither has one of the largest GDPs or the largest populations. So how do you monitor this vast coastline? How do you ensure you have full situational awareness over this vast coastline and chains of islands or groups of islets in the Aegean? As an outsider, as civilians, for us, that was the first problem that popped to mind on how we can solve it. The way we solved it was through LAST, or the first step we did when we started the company was through LAST, our surveillance tower. Right now, there are such surveillance towers deployed. We have versions on electronic warfare, versions on short-range air surveillance, versions on maritime surveillance, and systems deployed for early fire detection with civil protection. Actually, we were happy to be among the first that detected the fire that started in Parnitha, like at the outskirts of Athens, just last week. Now, that starting from surveillance made total sense 5 years ago. Now, we need to understand we live in a totally different world. Number one, and I think the most important thing are the lessons from the wars in Ukraine and the lessons from the war in the Gulf. And I'm going to talk a bit on the war in the Gulf, because I think that's the elephant in the room that no one is talking about, is that after US launched Operation Fury and Iran responded with Operation True Promise, we have seen over the next 40 days, we saw that conflict. And one of the things we saw was it was the first time, I think, it was the first time since Pearl Harbor that US forces had that number of losses, not in terms of humans, but in terms of air bases, in terms of protecting their air bases, in terms of air units, in terms of drones lost, aircrafts lost, radars lost, surveillance systems lost. And it was larger than Vietnam. It was comparable with Pearl Harbor. So there, immediately, the elephant in the room is that, okay, if the US, that has the most multi-layered surveillance system on the planet right now, and especially deployed in the Middle East, why they suffered those losses. So I think we need to very seriously rethink how does an effective surveillance system looks like after the lessons from Operation Fury. In my opinion, that surveillance system cannot rely on few exquisite sensors. You cannot have few very expensive exquisite sensors. Those would make sense if you had to deal with a Western Air Force, if you had to deal with an enemy Air Force that had 200, 300 aircrafts, yes. But if you have to deal with an industrial power that manufactures drones at industrial scale, probably you need a situational awareness system that is distributed, that relies on attritable sensors, low-cost sensors. And I think that's where that's where the whole talk by the chief Hoopis before makes a lot of sense. On how startups and new technologies, how they have strategic value in this new landscape.
That's really interesting, and I want to come back to that in a second. But Vassilis, let's get you into the conversation. How did ICEYE start with a focus either on commercial or defense, or was it really dual use?
So it started off, so I think by design or by nature, Earth observation is dual use, right? And specifically, when you can get your technology, your system, right, to meet military specs, right? When it comes to Earth observation, for example, your resolution needs to be, at least 30 centimeters, right? So if you can get your system to meet those military specs, automatically we're talking about a dual-use system. So Earth observation by design is dual-use. Now, ICEYE started more on trying to cover needs on the civilian side of the spectrum, climate change and disaster response. That explains the name of the company, ICEYE. The first pass was over an iceberg over the North Pole. The focus was really the civilian use cases. The turning point was the war in the Ukraine, right? When the company started contributing to the Ukrainian cause by allocating one satellite, the capacity of one whole satellite. There are articles calling it the people's satellite. And then the engineering effort led to improving the system so we can get down to 25 centimeters, right? And then I think the company aligned itself with its true nature, which is, of course, dual use. But I think in these times, the focus for all those reasons that the panel discussed has shifted more towards defense and security. So I think the engineering effort stays true to the original mission, which is a dual-use system. However, that system can really deliver in the battlefield. So we are, seeing its value by the feedback we get from our customers, and being a product company, we're actually trying to integrate that feedback into the R&D loop, right? So I think the dual use hat always stays there, but I think the market and the real needs pivot the company slightly more towards defense, at least at this point in time.
So I want to come back to something, a point you made, Dimitrios. Again, for all of these companies, you've been out in front funding your own prototypes in advance of defined requirements from the customer, and in some cases really creating new technologies that the military is then creating new concepts of operations around. So taking it from the standpoint of the investor, how do you get conviction from investors on that type of strategy? Rob?
Yeah, I think really demonstrating the operational requirement and need. So I think the lessons from Ukraine and Epic Fury absolutely stand. But if I think back to the time I served in the military in northern Iraq, we were seeing the first instance of weaponized quadcopters where grenades were being dropped from clamps. And clearly when they're stationary or at very low speeds, the existing effectors simply didn't exist. So we developed a quadcopter interceptor system. But really it comes back to leveraging that private capital, and so you're having to tell that story as you are developing. And when you develop those systems and you show there is operational success achievable at that relatively low cost, I think you then get buy-in from the military users. And I think partnered with that leverage of private capital is just sometimes the frustration with the status quo. Again, thinking 10 years ago, procurement was process-driven and looking at exquisite hardware platforms that require a lot of people to operate and maintain. And many, many people get one system either in the air or on the water. And so through software, you can use many systems by one human. And really, I think we're quite lucky at Anduril having a visionary founder. I mean, like Dimitrios, you've got to have that conviction in the vision that you have and getting buy-in from investors to make that a reality. So I think our senior leadership, our willingness to leverage that private capital and get their buy-in, I think has been extremely important. But the main thing is addressing operational requirements for military end users, I would say.
And Dimitrios, did you build it and they came? How did you come to the vision of the towers, the surveillance towers, to start the company?
Yeah, I mean, originally we started the other way around, as you said, compared to what traditionally happens in defense, where we envision something, we go through some first deployments, and through discussions we change the specifications tailored to the end user, and we have self-funded that for like 4.5 years now. Like in a sense, we convinced private investors, most of them having to do nothing with Greece. Actually, some of them, they have never even been to Greece. We have convinced them to spend, at least so far, much more than like $10 million, with the hope that the Greek armed forces will later on, procure those systems. Yeah, it's really hard to convince an investor that, and if you put it inside the computer will tell you don't do that. Now,
Yes.
Does that work? I mean, I don't know. I think it depends on the commander's intent. It depends on the intent of each government. And let me give you an example here. The German government, they realized they need to rearm. They realize they need to rearm, and they realize that if they rearm just by buying foreign weapons, they're going to go definitely bankrupt. To minimize the probability of going bankrupt or having some of that money returning, they said, okay, we need to have a startup scene that's going to flourish. That's also going to help our automotive industry, reinvigorate our traditional machinist industry, reinvigorate, and so on and so forth. And they passed a bunch of laws to do that. And those laws simplified procurement such that a startup can compete on equal footing with a prime. Let me give some examples of those laws. Some examples is that, for example, they awarded $1 billion each to two startups for loitering munitions without any of them having any prior, in the Greek is οικονομοτεχνικά criteria, like with none of them having any prior revenue. In Greece, not even ELCAC. Not even ELCAC, the most innovative organization, has even put out a contract, not of 1 billion, of like 20 million, where they don't have this barrier that to apply for a contract of 20 million, you need to already have a revenue of 3 million, let's say. Or, for example, they pay upfront in that contract. A portion of the contract is paid upfront. If at the contract you only pay at the end, then only a prime that already has a really good cash flows, a really good establishment with the banks, is able to secure a loan such that they can fund production. Or they put in there as a term that we don't just buy a ready-made product, because we know it's drones, and drones depreciate every 2 years, but we buy a drone, a factory, and the promise, like the obligation, that you are going to give us the new versions of this drone over a decade. So the German government implemented those measures. And now you see there are at least 3 unicorns. I know one of them is about to make an IPO in Germany that 2 years ago did not exist. So whether the choice of a crazy seed investor, like the crazy seed investors that invested 20 million to us, such that we spent them primarily to try to convince the Greek armed forces. That was private money, not government money. Whether that bet is going to materialize into a company like ICEYE in Finland that's going to raise 200 million, is going to create like 1,000 jobs here, this depends on the commander's intent, and I mean the government's intent, right? If the intent is like Finland and Germany, then yes, it will happen. If not, it's not going to happen. But it's not something that depends on us. Like, what can depend on us is how quickly we respond to feedback, how well we serve the organizations that we work for, how quickly we adapt to new technologies. For that reason, our team has spent a lot of time over the recent months in Kiev. There we have seen a much, much faster pace cycle. Like if we say Germany or Finland is fast compared to the status quo in the rest of Europe, then you cannot imagine how faster things go when you have Shaheeds above your head. So yeah, that's, I think we need to see where this is going to end.
Yes. And Vassilis, how did you know that building a better synthetic aperture radar would fly, so to speak, that there'd be strong demand for that?
So I think I'll have to agree with my colleagues here. In ICEYE journey, all those factors play their role. So you start from the team, even the charisma and the aura of the founder and their ability to speak with investors and the risk appetite of investors to come on board and believe in a project that hasn't taken off yet. And then I think going back to Rob's point, does that system that you have prototyped or you're starting to manufacture at scale, does that solve a real operational need? And I think when it comes to Earth observation with synthetic aperture radar, I think that technology existed. So people, I think even from the 60s, right? So that technology existed. The question is, can you do it cheaper, at scale, and in a sovereign fashion? So I think those were the convincing elements, right, that got the investors on board. We signed our first contract with the Brazilian Air Force, right? Not even in Europe, right? So I think the fact that the company had the engine, so it's an engineering company, right? So we start by that, right? And it still is, and it always will be, right? The company cares about producing technology. What's great about ICEYE is not guys like me speaking on panels, is the engineers in the labs producing the technology day and night, 24/7. So we knew that SAR existed, right? We made it cheaper, smaller, and we were able to deliver sovereign missions. Because we know that the MODs, when it comes to critical intelligence, from space also, they feel way more comfortable when they can control and own the system and not rely and depend on other nations, even allied nations, for the delivery of critical intelligence, right? So we signed our first contract with the Brazilian Air Force. At the same time, we were ramping up our manufacturing capacity. So we were launching more and more satellites in space. So that gave us the power of data. So we were launching satellites, we had data, we would sell the data to our customers, and the customers started to appreciate the operational value, right? That's a virtuous cycle, right? So you raise more capital, you build more satellites, and then we had the Greek government who took a risk on us. I'll have to appreciate the reason why we're in Greece, and I didn't say it in my opening remarks. Back in 2024, we signed a contract with the Greek government, the Ministry of Digital Governance, to deliver 2 SAR satellites within the National Microsatellite Program, and it was our first major European customers, right? And then all the other MODs followed in Europe, right? So I think you stay focused on this product approach. I'll say it again, that's my personal opinion, right? Instead of like chasing after various European programs that don't give you focus, you stick to your technology, you deliver a product that works, and then you get the validation through the market, you feed it back to the investors, you get more capital, you grow.
I think we have time for one more question, possibly. So Rob, let's talk about Anduril in Europe. In the current political environment, can you sell effectively in Europe?
Yeah, no doubt it is challenging, but I think I've been amazed by, I think, the persistence of European countries in those headwinds, should we call them, and those are real, and we respect that. We are establishing an office this year to develop non-ITAR controlled software capabilities. Also this year, but I can't speak about publicly, we will have a licensed co-production facility. And we are, in some instances, partnering with great companies in country to go for significant programs of record. So we want to operate in this ecosystem. If you're here today from a Greek company, I want to speak to you, so let's catch up outside. But we really need to localize and accelerate that.
Would you partner with the Greek shipyard? I needed to get that out.
Yeah, sure. I think if I can just say 2 examples quickly. In the UK, we've partnered with a company called Kraken. And so we're going to work with them on manufacturing in other markets. In South Korea, we've partnered with Hyundai Industries for much larger autonomous surface vessels. So the flavor of those partnerships can be different. If it's the right partner, the right project, we are open to working with others in Greece, for sure.
Fantastic. We could probably do this for another hour. But
Yeah.
we're being yanked off the stage. So thank you, gentlemen. It's a fantastic discussion today.